Tonight, a special ceremony to honor lives lost to COVID-19.
More than 2,750 Torontonians lost unexpectedly in 1 year.
Toronto reflects on a difficult year on the anniversary of the first COVID death in the city.
The impact of online hate and hatred and racism is very deep.
Plus, a new Canadian campaign tackles online hate, what it's demanding of social media companies.
It has to start with the city actually acknowledging that people staying outside are people.
And we'll show you what advocates for people living in Toronto's tent encampments are demanding as the city moves ahead with plans to relocate them to hotels.
This is CBC Late Night News.
Good evening, I'm Chris Glover. Thanks for joining us on what was a somber day for many in our city. Exactly 1 year ago today, Toronto experienced its first COVID death in a pandemic that went on to kill more than 2,700 people in our city alone. In a moment, we'll take you to the vigil that was held tonight to honor the lives that were lost. But first, Talia Ricci brings us up to speed on how Ontario and other provinces are still struggling to find the right balance between removing COVID restrictions and keeping people safe.
Among the sunny, spring-like scenes today in Toronto is a somber reminder.
More than 2,750 residents have died here in our city.
1 year after Toronto's first COVID-19 related death, case numbers creep upwards. But this weekend, some rule changes came as a surprise.
Everybody in our industry was completely shocked and surprised that we get to open.
Outdoor dining is allowed now in Toronto, and the capacity for indoor dining in the province's red and orange zones has increased. This comes the same weekend health officials declared a COVID-19 outbreak at a steakhouse in a Toronto suburb. Dozens of patrons may have been exposed to a variant of concern.
I had palpitations seeing people in restaurants like that unmasked.
Some experts are wary of reopening too quickly and encouraging residents to spend time outdoors instead, where the risk is lower.
What we're going to see is certainly a third wave of cases, and how we behave determines how high that wave is.
Other provinces are trying to strike a balance as cases tick upwards. Manitoba's debating easing restrictions, while in Saskatchewan, dozens of schools are shifting to online learning this week due to concerns over outbreaks of coronavirus variants. Dr. Darren Markland in Alberta shares those concerns.
B117 is a beast. It's far more infectious.
Alberta's premier and his cabinet are meeting Monday to discuss reopening. Dr. Markland is against relaxing restrictions now, noting it's the first time in several weeks hospitalizations are not decreasing.
I've been down this road now 3 times. To continue to do the same thing and expect a different result is truly the definition of insanity. We've put a lot of hard work into getting the numbers where they are, and we don't want to blow it right before the finish line.
A finish line experts now say is visible.
This is the last stretch.
Here in Toronto, a ceremony Sunday evening honored all of the lives lost during the pandemic. More than 7,000 in this province alone. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
A moving performance from Canadian blues vocalist Shakura Saida. That was during that ceremony at City Hall that Talia was just telling us about to mark the 1 year anniversary of the first COVID-19 related death in our city. Now, earlier today, Mayor John Tory declared March 21st as a day of remembrance for those lost to COVID-19 in Toronto. Dahlia Ashry was following along with this evening's virtual vigil and joins us now at Nathan Phillips Square. Dahlia, what was the mood like for that ceremony tonight?
Pandemic, there's always been people attending vigils here when the time came for it, but this one was unlike any other. There was no one really here. Actually, matter of fact, when I was here earlier today, there were people standing around and they didn't quite even really know what was going on with the candles, which I'm going to get to in a minute. So there are about 2,700 candles lit here by the city, and it's paying tribute to more than the 2,700 people who lost their lives, each one this past year due to the pandemic. And also, as you could see, they are in circles. There are 12 circles for the 12 months that have passed. There is also the Toronto sign that's lit in white in memory, paying tribute to those lives lost. There were 12 bell tolls that also went off earlier today, and the flags were put at half-mast. You know, and it really represents a lot of the people who've passed, you know, from parents to grandparents, frontline workers, and more. And amongst those who've also paid tribute was Mayor John Tory.
The grandmothers, grandfathers, the mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, children, neighbors, co-workers, and classmates who have left us this year. In many cases, they died alone because of the very same pandemic, and those close to them never had a chance to say goodbye. But today offers us a chance to grieve together as a city, and I hope that it will inspire us all in the memory of those we have lost, inspire us to soldier on and get through these final months of this pandemic. The vaccine will bring this pandemic to an end.
Now, today doesn't only mark the 1 year since the first person who died due to COVID-19. It's also a time for many to reflect on the trials and tribulations of the pandemic. Now, I spoke to one person, like I said earlier, although he didn't quite know what was going on, he was reflecting on the fact that his mom was stuck in South Africa earlier this year, and he was stressed out with that. And then when I told him to look at the candles and asked him what he thought as he reflected on what these candles represented, this is what he had to say.
Probably more cautious now than I was before, because I think people are taking it lightly. And I think they don't run into situations where they see the numbers represented in such a way that it's shocking, right? So when you look at it, I don't know if it truly represents the impact that it's had here, but it is shocking to see those numbers.
Now, the candles will be lit until midnight, and the city is encouraging anyone who's lost a life or know of anyone who's lost a loved one due to COVID-19 to put on lights at the porch or turn on a candle or light a candle and put it at the window. Back to you, Chris.
A stunning visual there behind you, Dahlia. Thanks so much for bringing us this story tonight. And talking about those shocking numbers, they continue even to this day. And for the third straight day, new COVID-19 infections in Ontario are above the 1,700 mark. The province logging 1,791 new cases today and 18 additional deaths. According to officials, as of 6 p.m. yesterday, more than 1.5 million doses of the vaccine have been administered. Now to a campaign to tackle online hate. The Canadian Race Relations Foundation and YWCA Canada joined forces to launch a program called Block Hate. The release of the campaign coincides with the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and many communities are still reeling after the shooting rampage at spas in Atlanta that claimed the lives of 8 people, including 6 Asian females. Farah Morelli explains how this latest initiative is trying to block the hate.
Maybe she should have stayed in her own country. Ugh.
Attention-seeking F you, Jihadi Jane. Oof.
One by one, they take turns reading the disturbing online comments directed at Noor Fidel after she shared the story of being attacked on public transit by a man who grabbed her hijab and yelled racial slurs.
Honestly, the effect that those comments had on me, even though it's like been 3 years, they're always going to be there.
The video is part of a new campaign called Block Hate.
The impact of online hate and hatred and racism is very deep.
The group behind the campaign has found racialized Canadians are almost 3 times more likely to be targeted online.
The reality is that algorithms are driving this content. People are almost always one click away from the most hateful content. You can click on one thing that's a conspiracy theory and the next thing and then the next thing, and there you are in the extremes corners of society.
We could see that the incidences were increasing, but we could also see that Digital hate, unfortunately, is an extension of hate that's happening in real life.
The campaign's launch comes just days after the Atlanta spa shootings, where 8 women, 6 of whom were Asian, were gunned down by a white man.
Certainly, the assumption that, racism only happens in the United States is not true. We have a very serious problem around anti-Asian racism here in Canada as well, right? And we need to address it from a policy level, from a personal level, and from like a community level.
The federal government is set to unveil legislation that would regulate social media platforms, including the ability to fine companies that allow hate speech to remain on their platforms. The Block Hate campaign is pushing for companies to be held accountable.
Tech companies must comply with international human rights frameworks and also legislation of the countries that they operate in and benefit from.
Tonight, the Toronto sign will be lit red to mark the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, shining a light on a dark and pervasive issue, both on and offline. Farah Morali, CBC News, Toronto.
Turning now to those tent encampments in Toronto parks, and people living in those spaces and their supporters were speaking out today, demanding for more affordable housing and safer conditions in shelters.
We're in the middle of a pandemic that's going up and down, and people are dying, and you're worried about people in camps, in tents, in your parks. And you want me to go into a hotel or shelters where there's been outbreaks?
A press conference was held in Alexandra Park, where trespass notices have been put up. The city launched its Pathways Inside program last week. The city is hoping to transition everyone living in 4 city encampments to hotels by April. The carpenter who built small shelters over the winter for those living outside was also there today. He is calling on the government for more support.
And a solution definitely requires federal and provincial governments to get involved, but it has to start with the city actually acknowledging that people staying outside are people, that they have rights, that they deserve respect.
Advocates went on to say that shelters are not the solution for everyone, and those living in the park have built a community and support base. All right, and now we are joined by Sophia Kambalia. And Sophia, another beautiful day. You can't see it under all this makeup, but I think I got a bit of a sunburn as well.
You and a few others. It's
No
amazing.
kidding.
I love how after all the cold months, all the neighbors are kind of coming out of the woodwork. You're starting to see people again. I spent the day cleaning windows. Perfect time for some spring cleaning as well. And the good news is that the nice weather, the gorgeous April-like temperatures will continue into the coming days. So there's lots of time to get out and enjoy. Look at Monday, for example. Kids might not even need a jacket when they head out to school. Maybe even just a light sweater will be fine for morning school drop-off. Monday around the GTA, we're talking mid-teens, even warmer as you head to the rest of Southern Ontario. 17 in Windsor, 18 in Barrie, Sudbury even cracking the double digits, 15 in Ottawa for your Monday. A little bit more of a lake influence for those of you Tuesday around the GTA, but we are on the up and up, folks. Like we're talking Thursday, for example, some communities, I wouldn't be surprised if you are pushing and flirting with 20 degrees, maybe even over. It's a week of double-digit temperatures. We're talking about a really big ridge of high pressure all the way from the Great Lakes to Atlantic Canada. It's offering full sun as well underneath it. We're talking about one of the least cloudiest months that we have seen in years. We're nowhere near the 60 or 70% of cloud cover that we normally see in March, rather, for example. Now, the luck of missing the late season showers and storms and rain does end midweek. We'll detail some of those storms and when the wet weather arrives in the long-range forecast. But the good news is it won't be a washout. All right, loving that good news. Thanks for bringing it to us, Sophia. To the Belleville area now, and a man is in custody after an OPP officer was stabbed early this morning. Now, police say before the officer was stabbed, a vehicle struck a police cruiser. The officer was hospitalized with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. It happened near Belleville just before 1 a.m. Police say a man was arrested without further incident.
And in Mississauga, one person is dead after a car crash. This happened last night near Dixie and the QEW. The vehicle drove into the sound barrier that separates the road from the highway. The driver died on scene. An investigation is currently ongoing, and police are asking anyone with dash cam or security footage to come forward. Still to come, Michael Kovrig's trial in China is set to begin tomorrow morning, 3 days after Michael Spavor's trial ended without a verdict. Coming up, we'll have the details. Stay with us. Welcome back. One of Canada's two Michaels is now on trial in China. And like it was for Michael Spavor last week, Michael Kovrig's trial is also being held behind closed doors, and Canadian officials are not being allowed inside. The CBC's Ashley Burke reports.
Canada is waiting and watching, hoping the trial unlocks an opportunity to bring the two Michaels home.
It's advancing no interest, not even for China, and it's causing immense human suffering.
Veena Najabullah is married to but separated from Michael Kovrig. She's also an international security expert and told Rosemary Barton Live she was happy to see U.S. officials push China in a meeting in Alaska this week.
But what really will make a difference for Michael and for Michael's power now are actions and concerted diplomatic effort on the part of all three governments to find a path forward.
The Michaels were arrested a week after Canada detained Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou to face extradition to the United States. She's under house arrest. They are detained under harsh conditions.
It's already 832 days. It's much longer than I thought it would go on when he was first picked up by the Chinese government.
Experts say the Chinese government wants to show strength, which is why it's going through with court proceedings, where there's a 99.9% conviction rate. But they suspect China is also weighing the potential political cost.
Should them be convicted and sentences, people will be very wary about engaging with China, trading, sending people there studying, and even, going to China for leisurely purposes.
I kept clinging on to hope. That's what I had.
China deported Canadian Kevin Garrett in 2016. Detained for more than 2 years, he waited another 5 months after being tried to learn he was convicted and headed home. And that offers some hope in the Michaels cases.
I try to focus on the fact that there might be a light at the end of this tunnel, right? And we will get through this.
Speaking before the trial, Najibullah said that she hopes Kovrig remains calm and uses every opportunity to defend his innocence after being confined for so long. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
How long can this beautiful weather last? Sophia Kambalia will be back in just a minute with that, and also how high those temperatures are expected to get this week. We'll be right back. 45 summers have passed since Tom Cheek and Early Wynn introduced the Toronto Blue Jays to their new fans through the magical medium of radio. This year, though, there's a change that has some lovers of the game crying foul. CBC's Thomas Dagg has the story.
This is Toronto Blue Jays baseball.
Here's a sure sign of spring, the return of baseball on the radio.
And that'll be a one-out base hit for...
But this season, the game sounds different. Not only are COVID measures again keeping the Blue Jays away from Toronto, but owner Rogers is citing staff safety for upending a time-honored tradition. Play-by-play for the radio has been cut, replaced with sound from the TV broadcast. And for John Ray, it's not at all the same.
It seems to be like a callous, cost-cutting move.
He's a longtime baseball fan, and he's blind.
Swinging a high fly ball to left field. Gardner.
So Ray would usually depend on the radio commentary for a detailed description.
Not only to describe what's happening on the field, but to tell us about the ambiance. Paint the picture of what's happening in the stadium.
Listen as the pictures on TV do some of the talking after this famous home run.
Now the 2-2. Well hit down the left field line. Way back in.
On the radio, that same hit required a bit more context.
A swing and a belt. Left field. Way back. Blue Jays win it. The Blue Jays are World Series champions.
Of all the things that they could cut, cutting back radio for baseball just doesn't make sense to me.
Here's the first pitch and a swing and a foul.
In Major League Baseball, it's practically unheard of, a team without dedicated radio broadcasters, like the late Tom Cheek, the voice of the Jays for decades, or for the Montreal Expos in later years, Elliot Price.
I really can't see this happening in any other market, and I also can't see it happening next year in Toronto. This is a one-year thing, and they've made a mistake.
There's been no word from Rogers on the plan for next season. Perhaps when the Jays return home, radio could be back as well. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto Raptors coach Nick Nurse has been fined $50,000 for throwing his face mask and for swearing toward game officials before exiting the court during Friday night's game. The incident occurred after Pascal Siakam missed a three-point attempt at the buzzer that could have tied the game. Nurse was upset at the end of Toronto's 115-112 loss to the Utah Jazz, a game in which the Jazz took 41 free throws compared with the Raptors' 14. Talking baseball, talking basketball, and now I want to talk about that flirting with, did you say around 20 in some parts of our region?
Yeah, I could say that over and over again in March. Can you believe that?
Yes.
You'll be able to play the baseball and the football and the basketball and everything outdoors this week, which is awesome. We should be about 6 this time of year, Chris. We will be 15 for Monday, and it continues really for the rest of your work week. It started on Saturday, it goes right until Friday if you're talking a consecutive stretch of double-digit temperatures. We talked about this earlier. Big ridge of high pressure. It's covering basically half the country. It's offering full sun underneath it. How much sunshine, though, will you see for Monday, for example? Okay, 9 hours. Isn't that amazing? Sunrises around 7:15 in the morning. It's not going to be done when you're talking about full sun until after dinner time. 9 hours of sunshine for March is just amazing. Drops off a little bit, though, Thursday into Friday. Let's talk about that. Dry air mass over top of us, but the humid, moisture-laden air mass is looking to push in. That battle is seen clearly on Thursday. Cold temperatures move back into the north. Meanwhile, the heat is at its peak in the south, 17, 18 in southwestern Ontario. It's late Wednesday into Thursday, though, that the first round of really light showers moves in, and then heavier rain is what we're forecasting Thursday into Friday. It's mostly going to be a Friday story, though, about 20 millimeters of rain. Not a total washout. There will be some breaks, and it's still a little far out in the forecast, but you may need an umbrella here and there. So if you're planning the golf round, I think Thursday is the day to beat as far as the heat and the sunshine goes this upcoming work week. And then, of course, that rain happens, the cold front passes, and then we are back down to seasonal, folks. It will feel a little bit shocking to the system, but it's still pretty nice for this time of year. When you think about it, some of the temperatures that we're seeing in the earlier part of this work week are more indicative of June. So take it while you can. Here's a quick look before I let you go at your Monday morning forecast. Again, jacket or no jacket, I think you'll be just fine for tomorrow. Pretty awesome.
I will take it. And I'm not much of a golfer, but thanks for planning my week there, Sophia.
You're welcome. Get out and enjoy.
All right, have a good night. And that is our show for tonight. Thanks again for watching. Before we go, we'll leave you with another moment from tonight's virtual ceremony as the city paid tribute to all the lives lost due to the pandemic. Have a great night.
I once was lost, oh, but now